This is a story about Bob. In our story, there are advanced aliens from our nearest solar system, Proxima Centauri. These aliens have run out of fuel just at the edge of our solar system and need help. They send the only message they can to Bob. This message is a one-time direct beaming of information into Bob's brain. Bob wakes up suddenly from his sound sleep. He knows several things he did not know before. Aliens exist. They need our help. They're at the edge of our solar system. And they need a large supply of plutonium to reach our planet. Bob is excited to tell his lifelong friend, Tim, about this. He rushes out and tells Tim. And Tim has known Bob his whole life, and he knows the following things about Bob. Bob never lies, and Bob never makes up stories. Tim, however, has every right to be skeptical of his friend. After all, there are other explanations for what Bob has said. Maybe Bob had a dream. Maybe Bob had had a seizure causing visions. Maybe Bob has incurred brain damage. Or any other possible natural explanation that could explain this that Tim is simply unaware of. Tim accepts that Bob has had an experience, but has no way to verify that the experience is genuine versus any other possibility. He outlines the issue for his friend Bob. In one scenario, Bob is understandably upset, perhaps feels betrayed by his friend. He might even accuse Tim of calling him a liar, no matter how well Tim explains his position to Bob. It might be that emotions overcome Bob, and the two friends break ways. That's one possible end to this story. So let's consider a different scenario. Bob understands Tim's concerns now that he has had time to think about them, and the two of them sit down to try to solve the problem. How can they convince anyone that this was a real experience of real aliens? The two form some ideas. Perhaps they could communicate with the aliens, but no, it was a one-way transmission. The aliens said so, and they didn't bother to tell Bob how to call back. Perhaps they could send a probe to contact the aliens, but neither of them could afford such a thing. They'd have to convince others of this idea, and that leads back to the problem at hand, which is proving the event occurred. Perhaps they could have Bob's brain scanned at the doctor's office and see if any odd results show up. But those odd results, no matter how odd, could not simply be said to be from aliens, because aliens are an unproven idea. The doctors would assume it was a natural phenomenon, and rightly so. Bob is frustrated. He knows it's real. His friend believes him, but only to a point. Although Tim agrees that Bob had something happen to him, he thinks it could be any number of other possible explanations. Bob understands that, but insists he's being honest. This was a real communication, and he just knows it. But he still agrees that this is simply not enough to convince anyone else, not even his friend Tim. They simply lack the ability to prove that this is real. Although the two remain friends, the aliens, meanwhile, due to being out of fuel, starve to death and die at the edge of our solar system, never to be discovered. And this would be a tragic and sad ending to our tale. So let's try something else. Perhaps the two put up a crowdsourced campaign telling people of Bob's experience. There's plenty of alien enthusiasts who would pay money to fund this, but they already believe in aliens. And so they don't need to be shown that there's proof. Well, that might raise enough money to send a probe, or even maybe the fuel itself, to the edge of the solar system, and the day would be saved. That's a good ending. And one might be tempted to end the story there, but what if they couldn't raise enough funds on the backs of the alien believers alone? How could they convince anyone else to send money? Remember, Bob's honest, so he would not allow any tricks or scams to be run. Do they have any hope of convincing anyone? I'll leave that question for you to answer. Many people claim to have had experiences of God. The problem is, we have too many plausible natural explanations for such experiences, and we have zero proof of a God. Just like in our story where we had no proof of aliens. In either case, we have every right to be skeptical of the true source of the experience. Was it sent by a God, by aliens, or by the brain? How do we know without some testing? And if we have no test to run, shouldn't we be skeptical? Perhaps Bob should have been skeptical of his experience in the first place, and our story would only change slightly. He might still tell his friend, but do so with the doubt that the event actually occurred, and we would get to the ending where the aliens died because, well, our jaded skeptics were unable to prove that it was aliens in the first place. But I think that Bob, being a skeptic, would suggest that for an advanced species, the aliens were a bit dull in thinking that a one-time transmission that could not be proven would work to get them the help they needed. Bob could suggest the aliens should have contacted Bill Gates or Notch or any other really rich person who could have easily afforded to send a probe or even the fuel to them. The aliens just lucked out here and died due to being somewhat dumb, or at least made a fatal error this one time. That can be understood. Mere mortals make errors, and sometimes fatal ones. No matter how advanced they become, they could always mess up. But what if we rewrote our story and said that the aliens are very, very smart and never ever mess up? What would that story look like? Well, the aliens couldn't run out of fuel because they would have known how much fuel to take with them. They'd have backup plans in case of emergency and contingency plans. Maybe, however, something still happens and they wind up out of fuel despite their advanced intelligence and planning. Very well, they would surely know that there was life on our planet, else sending any message would be pointless, and they must also know something about our brains, or how would they know how to send any message at all? So it would stand to reason they would know who to contact and what information to give that person. Perhaps they could give the person information that could prove the aliens existed, technology beyond that of humans, or at least contact someone with the private funding to send fuel out there on their own without any outside help. Hiccups in our aliens' plans would only be due to some huge unforeseen error that was somehow not planned for, and the reader might be able to stretch their belief out to accept it, or they might call it a bad story. But what if we went further? What if we gave the aliens not just super intelligence, but also the ability to know the future? With that in mind, there's no way we can strand our aliens at the edge of our solar system by sheer error, as any and all errors would be seen by them long in advance. Aliens that knew the future would never run out of fuel, and never have to contact Bob in the first place. They would show up at our doorstep, so to speak, and let the world know they're here. Perhaps they'd send a probe ahead to tell us about them and know what to expect so we didn't freak out when they show up. People do, in fact, have experiences that they'll say are from aliens. There are some that believe that aliens have visited people, have done mental or other probing, and somehow did it all without leaving any trace behind. But I'm not one of those people. Like Tim, I'm a skeptic, and I need to have proof that aliens exist before I think that aliens are a cause in the first place. Without the proof, I only have what I know to be true as an explanation. And the only things that I know to be true are natural, mundane explanations. An alien or supernatural entity or God or whatever you might want to call it is not something that has been shown to be a thing independently and thus cannot be proposed as an explanation until it is shown to even be a thing in the first place. For some, the internal proof is all they need. Some mystical, magical, uplifting experience is enough. But is feelings really a good way to base a decision upon? No matter how profound the experience, no matter how deep the feelings run, no matter how awesome and transformative it might have been, unless you have proof of the thing in question first, that experience could be chalked up to any other possible explanation that you're simply not aware of. And to fill in the void and say that you know what the answer is, without any way to demonstrate that you have the answer, without any test, without any methodology, you're simply applying personal ignorance and or personal incredulity. You are assuming that your experience means this thing without any proof that the thing is even a thing in the first place. If it's not good enough for Tim, why is it good enough for you? And if that argument wouldn't convince you of somebody else's position, why even try to use it at all? We need more than personal experience to show that a phenomenon is real. We should think that the personal experience does not show that the phenomenon is real, because there are possible alternative explanations for the personal experience. And without some way to ferret out all the other possibilities and show that it is the thing that you think it is, all you're basing your claim on is faith and not fact.